Albie Amankona joined us, commentator and co-founder for Conservatives Against Racism. Morning, Albie.
Good morning, Callum.
So first of all then, this exclusive from the Telegraph on two more parties at Downing Street as the Queen and the country mourned the death of the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip. I suppose it is all about how today unfolds now and whether resignations are due, overdue, or whether we're not going to see any resignations at all today.
Yes, I think it is all about how the day unfolds today. I think one of the big problems with this story is the symbolism of the Queen sitting alone at the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral. I would say is one of the defining images of the pandemic, if not the defining image of the pandemic. And so the revelation that gatherings at the heart of government were literally happening on the eve of the Duke's funeral, I think is very bad for the Prime Minister. It's bad for the government and it's bad for the Conservative Party because the Conservative Party is a staunch royalist political party. You've got a lot of royalists voting for the Conservative Party, and there are two parties in question that allegedly happened on that night. One for James Slack, the Prime Minister's former Director of Communications, and another for one of Boris Johnson's personal photographers. And I think what it highlights, as many people have said before, is a pattern of culture at Number 10 of disregarding official government guidance. I mean, the government guidance at the time was you must not socialise indoors except with your household support bubble. You can meet outdoors, including in gardens, but in groups of 6. And for many people, and especially Conservatives like myself who abhor pointless rules and regulations, many think of the Prime Minister, key Conservative Party figures such as the Mayor of London candidate Sean Bailey, CCHQ staffers and schools of staff at Number 10 consistently disregarding the rules. So you've got to ask the question, were such authoritarian rules needed for the entire population?
So were the rules needed? The fact is they existed, though, and that's kind of where we're at this point, isn't it? And so it is about what now satisfies, what calms this situation. To what extent are resignations the only solution to that?
I think to some extent a rejigging, a reorganisation of Number 10 is what's needed, but that's something which I've been talking about since autumn last year when we first saw everything that was going on with Owen Paterson. And I think there is potentially a mood to say maybe it's past that point. So I think we'll just have to see how the day unfolds. But I know from a lot of Conservatives, a lot of commentators were talking about how what really needed to happen on the other side of Christmas was a real change in how we saw the Prime Minister behaving and how we saw him responding to events. Now, he apologised earlier on this week. That's always to be commended. But, we really do need to start seeing some of those changes that people have been calling for a long time. And that might mean resignations. That might mean a reorganisation of Number 10. It might mean something more drastic, as Andrew Bridgen has called for, and we'll come on to that later on.
Well, yes, indeed. It's a good point. And that is another element to all of this, isn't it? In terms of where Conservative MPs and the mood of Conservative MPs are at. As you say, let's come to that in a sec, because I just want to sneak in this report from the Times. Downing Street lockdown parties were not criminal. That's what Sue Gray is expected to say, the civil servant that's overseeing the inquiry. There's been a lot of buzz, hasn't there, about the independence or otherwise of Sue Gray in this matter, given that she answers to the Prime Minister fundamentally. And so I think it's probably worth considering that this is an internal inquiry rather than an independent one. I think that's the language to use, isn't it? In terms of what Sue Gray is going to say, though, the Times reports that she's expected to avoid making a judgment over whether Boris Johnson breached the ministerial code by attending that party on May the 20th, 2020, because it does not lie within her remit. And I think this is the thing, isn't it, with this inquiry, Albie, that while all focus is now on this and the outcome of this, actually the outcome of this is likely to just be the facts that we already know.
Exactly, and I think there is a risk with putting everything on this report. Look, Sue Gray's report will find what it finds. I think what's important is how the report lands with the public. Does it pass the smell test? And we've seen how public perception can condemn you without proof of guilt, as we've seen with Prince Andrew, who I'm sure we'll come on to later. And, I have to say my instincts from this article aren't the best, but I will reserve full judgment until the full report is released. Just thinking about, the week that one of these Downing Street parties alleged to happen between the 15th of May and the 21st of May, there were 807 fixed penalty notices issued for breaches of COVID rules in England and Wales during that period. This is the week of the Prime Minister's Garden Party business meeting. And those people don't have the machine of government to find loopholes for them to essentially evade the criminal justice system. And it feeds into a narrative of one law for them, and another law for us, and that's dangerous. And I think, last night we saw Andrew Bridgen come out and call for the Prime Minister to quit, and I don't expect Andrew to be the last PM to call for the Prime Minister to stand down. We have seen since the Patterson scandal, so many six givens the opposition to beat us with at the May elections, which are coming up in a couple of months' time, and subsequent general elections. And if the Prime Minister survives this, which I think he probably will, the local elections, they will be bruising. And I expect that after that, he will be in trouble again. And MPs in marginal seats with small majorities will likely be the first to follow Bridgen. And just one thing to think about in light of the news that came out yesterday that Labour was 10% ahead in the polls. Now, this isn't scientific, but there are 103 Conservative seats which Labour could win with a 10% swing to Labour. About half of those could be lost to Labour with a 5% swing to Labour, and it includes almost the entire red wall. So, a lot of these big majorities can actually be quite flimsy. And if Boris isn't the election winner that he was in the past, I wouldn't be surprised if he's in trouble.
Let's go on then, Albie, to the other story that's dominating the morning. And this is, of course, Prince Andrew. Let me just read some of the newspaper front pages on this. The Times, Andrew humiliated as Queen strips his titles. The Daily Star, the narcissist formerly known as Prince. The front page of the Eye, Prince Andrew cast out by the Queen. Thrown out. Throne, for those in any doubt. Thrown out on the front page of The Sun. So this is the Queen stripping Prince Andrew of all his royal and military titles yesterday after summoning him to Windsor Castle. Of course, it's as a civil case brought by Virginia Giuffre has been allowed to progress by a judge in New York. Always worth mentioning that Prince Andrew strenuously denies allegations made against him. I suppose it's the embarrassment factor at this stage of this story, isn't it, Albie? The front pages of really all the papers really going for Prince Andrew on this.
Yes, the front pages of all the papers really are going for Prince Andrew on this. And I suppose quite rightly, you might argue. The Queen has stripped the Duke of Edinburgh of all of his honorary and military roles and royal patronage. Not the Duke of Edinburgh,
the Duke of York.
The Duke of York, excuse me. The Duke of York of his honorary military roles and royal patronages after a face-to-face meeting which he had with him yesterday. And of course, this is in light with the allegations that Virginia Roberts Giuffre is pursuing against him. And it's basically after the US court basically decided to allow Virginia Roberts to pursue this case against him. And the headlines aren't going to get any better. This is where it's beginning. And the court case hasn't actually even began. When all of that evidence is being read out, when either Prince Andrew testifies or his lawyers are testifying in his capacity for him, these stories are only going to get worse. So I fear this is only the beginning for Prince Andrew's troubles with this particular story.
Albie, really appreciate your analysis this morning. Thank you very much. Nice to speak to you.